Yee! Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Tiffany here, and I'm the owner of Tiffany Gordon Cosplay LLC, which is a company that focuses on costume and prop fabrication as well as education. So welcome. Love to have you as part of our community, so subscribe and like this video. On this cosplay tutorial, I'm going to be going over how I made the Lilith Horns helm thing from Diablo. These things. So, let's begin. And here are all of the tools and materials that you will need for making these horns, including 2, 4, and 10mm HD foam, and I'll have links to all of this in the description. And of course, I have my horn pattern available on my website, TiffanyGordonCosplay.com, link again in the description. And I'll first start off by saying these horns are a bit difficult to make, so do be aware. But once you get the pattern, you will want to trace all of parts A through C, I through Z, and 1 through 4 onto 2mm foam, and then heat treat it and cut it out. And also, don't forget to label everything. And for me, I had just got a Glowforge, which is a laser cutter, so I wanted to try it out for this project, but you do not need one in order to make these horns. But I wanted to test it out, so I use this for all of the 10mm foam, and you'll want to put parts B1 through C1, I1 through Z1, and 1 through 4 onto 10mm foam, heat treat it, and then cut it out. Don't forget to label all of your 10mm foam as well. Then it is time to start applying our contact cement glue for attaching. And how each of these pieces are intended to attach are your 2mm foam. You will be applying your glue onto the side that has the writing, and then on all of your 10mm foam, you're going to be placing the glue on the back side that does not have the writing. Then wait for all of your glue to dry and then start attaching them. Each of the pieces should attach to their correlating letter or number. So for example, C1, which is a 10mm foam, will attach on top of its correlating letter C, which is the 2mm foam. And the 2mm foam is only supposed to cover the holes, so it will not actually go to the edges of the 10mm foam. And this is what all of the pieces should look like when they are attached to their correlating counterpartner. I also wanted to remove some of the bulkiness of the 10mm foam, and so I got an X-Acto knife and I trimmed down just the middle sections of the cutout parts. Reason for this is I tend on applying later on foam clay to add my details, and I didn't want them to be as high, and I wanted to look kind of more natural, like it went in and out. And I highly recommend doing this before attaching all of the horns together, as it can be a little bit more tricky later. Next, you're gonna wanna go onto the backside and cut each of the angles at a 45. This is gonna make it so we can assemble it! And by doing this, we're basically making each of our edges at a 45, so when we put the 4 parts of one horn together, they kind of make a square. Then you're gonna wanna apply more contact cement glue to all of your edges. Again, wait for the glue to fully dry, and then we're gonna start attaching them together. And I found it easiest to attach each of the pieces where the 10mm foam aligns, starting from the top, working my way down, and then attaching the top tip part, as your 2mm foam may shift slightly, and this will make it so you can trim it if need be. Then just continue until all 4 sides are attached to complete one of your horns. And there's a lot of parts for this, so just be patient and attach each piece until you have all of your horns made. There are a few pieces in this pattern that only have the 10mm foam on the bottom half, and then on the top half they need to connect to themselves. So you will want to apply the contact cement glue to those edges as well for the 2mm foam to attach it. Again, wait for your glue to dry before attaching together. And at this point, I'm starting to attach the 2 halves of the cowl together for the 2mm foam, and I will note that it's gonna look small, but we're gonna go back later and cut this open again to make it larger. But for structural reason, it's best to attach it together right now. Then just continue to attach more of the parts. until your piece kind of starts to look like a starfish like this. There is one piece that is a little bit different, and that is going to be the top spike that goes over your forehead, and this is part C and B. And you'll want to do the same steps where you trim them and you'll attach the center seam, but this one we're going to be making more of a triangle, so it's only going to be 3 parts that attach rather than the rest of the horns that have been 4 pieces. And for this one, you're going to be adding the glue to the bottom side of the attached parts as well as to the top half of the 2mm foam part A. Wait for the glue to again dry, and then you're going to attach it onto the bottom, and this is going to complete that kind of triangle shape. And congratulations for making it this far in your horn project. And we're going to take a minute to step back from applying glue, and we're going to mix it up to foam clay application now. And the reason for not finishing attaching all the horns at this point is each of these horns, for when they attach, are in weird positions, and it's going to make it so your fingers can't reach and cover each of these parts in foam clay. So let's make it easier and do the foam clay now. And if you've never used foam clay before, it's really easy. All you need is water, a paintbrush, and also your foam clay. In foam clay, you do want to be more moist, so you will want to keep adding water to the surface of your foam, because this is going to be your glue, but it's not real glue, it's water. And you'll get your foam clay, and then you will rub it on the surface. It's best to put everything in foam clay first, and then if you want to add any more details, go back and add more foam clay on top of that. You do again want your foam clay to be more soft and more moist, as this is the best consistency for working with a foam clay. Do not let it dry out, as if it dries out, then you can't use it anymore. So remember to keep zipping up your bag as you use the foam clay that it came in. And I put the foam clay mostly on all of the 10mm foam, so the gray foam, and covering all of those pieces. This is going to kind of make it more organic and less foam, as well as I covered the top tip of each of the pieces. And then with my clay working tools, I went in to add some details here and there as the clay starts to dry. And a helpful tip when working with these, you do want them to be off of the table and not resting, as the table, if you put wet foam clay on it with your piece, is going to get squished. So you want these to dry in air, and you want them to dry a full 24 hours to harden for the foam clay to fully dry out and harden. I did this for all of the spikes, including our starfish headpiece. And this is what they should look like right now. And once it is dry, we can continue attaching more horns. Applying our contact cement glue to the 2 open cowl pieces, as well as to the bottom side of each of our 2 extra horn parts. Wait for them to dry and then attach them. But wait, you may be asking, what about the middle forehead piece? Well, we're gonna get to that right now. And for that middle forehead piece, there is actually a gemstone that is in the center. And for this, I ended up 3D modeling and printing a piece, and you can get that file available on my website, TiffanyGordonCosplay.com, or you can just make a simple triangle foam piece. And if you did it out of foam, you can just attach it with contact cement glue. For me, I ended up resin printing it, and so I just used super glue, applied it to the back of my print, and attached it on top of the piece, and continued to add some of the foam clay to fill it in and look more like it was organic and growing out of this weird horn bone piece thing. Then just continue to add more details with the foam clay and your clay working tools, and once you're done, put that to the side to dry for 24 hours. And there's one more piece we need to cut out of foam, and that's gonna be it's like this tray thing that all of the fabric sits in. It's a weird piece. But for this, we're gonna be using 4mm HD foam, and this is gonna be parts D through H with my pattern. Reminder to heat treat your piece first and then cut it out with an X-Acto knife. For parts E through G, you will want to sand your edges at a 45 or trim them at a 45, but once that is done, done, you can apply your contact cement glue and start attaching them together so they have a more structural like look. As well as once it's attached, then you will want to clean up the edges so they are more parallel to the table. Apply your contact cement glue to the top surface of part D, as well as to the bottom part of your two triangular like pieces. Wait for your glue to dry and then attach. And I'll also note that while I was at my workbench, I used the sanding drum to kind of just chisel a random pattern onto the top part. This would give it a more texturized surface, make it easier to give a weathered like look, as this piece is supposed to look like metal. And the last part for attaching onto this piece would be our top triangle like forehead piece. Again, apply your contact cement glue to the top half of your four-metal foam, as well as to the bottom half of your forehead piece after your foam clay is fully dry for 24 hours. And then wait for your glue to dry and then attach them together. And then we can attach this final piece to the top part of our horns. I do recommend just putting it on top first to see where it is going to align before applying your glue, so you can get a good plan of action, as well as to see the placement of it's gonna kind of sit on top of the two horns that are next to the center as well. So you can kind of see where the placement is gonna be. Apply your glue, wait for it to dry, and then attach it together, and it should look something like this. And congratulations for making it this far, as this was extremely hard for me, and I hope that I am doing a decent job with explaining how I did it to help you. Now it's time to figure out the cowl size, and at this point it's probably going to be too small for you to wear, so you're going to want to at least attempt to put it on your head. Don't force it if it doesn't work. And this is where we're going to go onto the back center seam, and with some scissors we're going to just slowly cut open that seam again, and then keep putting it back and forth on your head until it is about the right fit. The more you cut it open, the more the part is going to separate in the back, and will make it so your head can squeeze in. And once you figure out exactly where you want it to be, I highly recommend cutting just some small little 2mm foam tabs and then gluing it onto the top part where that seam is going to stop. This is going to help to make sure that that seam does not continue to keep opening, as you're going to be taking this cowl on and off, and this is just going to help it so it doesn't continue to change its shape. The last thing I did for this was to continue to add some more foam clay. Now that all of our pieces are attached, you can continue to add some more details. I added the foam clay where all of the horns connected to kind of hide the glue, add some more details, and that pretty much completes making the base horns. Now for painting. And here are all the tools and materials you will need for painting your horns. A reminder that yes, I use airbrush paint, but you don't need to. You can use acrylic paint as a substitute. And I'll have links to everything in the description. To first start off, you're going to want to prime your piece. And for this, I highly recommend using Plasti-Dip. Spraying 3 heavy coats onto the entire surface. You will want to wait 1 hour in between each of the coats to let it fully dry to prime your piece. Then onto painting, and we're going to be using airbrush paint that was provided by Createx Colors, specifically their Wicked color line as well as their Candy line. Starting off with an all-over base coat of jet black, and next we're going to be focusing on the metal-like piece, and this one we're going to be using, and for this one we're going to be using gold chrome. Once that's dry, we're then going to go back with jet black, applying it on top of the gold chrome, and while the paint is still wet, we're going to grab a paper towel and wipe it away. This is going to leave all of the black in the creases and crevices and make it look like it is more of an older bronze. And there are a slight blue patina that is on top of this, and for having a metalsmith background, for me, I wanted to kind of mimic what it actually looks like to create this patina. So for this, I ended up using salt as well as mixing fluorescent aqua and candy delicious. Mixing all 3 of those together and kind of putting it into the cracks, into where places I wanted this weathered blue patina to be. And when mixing this mixture, you do want it to be really thick and have a lot more salt in it. The salt is going to cause it to kind of more look like a mineral surface once it dries. And then when it's dry, I like to go back with a dry paintbrush and kind of rub away a little bit of that salt, because the salt is naturally going to flake away a little bit if it was applied extremely thick, and that's okay. And then just kind of go back and forth. And I forgot to film this part, but I ended up sealing this with a paintbrush using Cratex Colors UVLS Satin Clear, waiting for it to fully dry, and then I ended up masking it off for our next paint color, which was Wicked Brown, and I applied this to the rest of the horns. And for the references of Lilith, it looked like the horns kind of blended into her face a little bit, so I wanted to make all the parts that were gonna touch my face to be lighter. And I did this with a mixture of cream and brown, applying this more heavy towards where it would attach on the face, gradually moving the airbrush gun away so the spray would get less thick and kind of do a natural gradient into the rest of the horns. Now for shading, and we're gonna again be using Jet Black, and you're gonna want to apply this in small sections, no more than 4 to 6 inches at a time. And while the paint is still wet, again, we're gonna use a paper towel and wipe it away. This will make it so all of the parts that the paper towel hits will remove most of the black paint, leaving it more of the brown to shine through. And then where the paper towel does not reach is gonna leave it darker and give natural shadows. And I did want to go back and add a little bit more highlights here and there. So once all the paint was dry, I did use a dry paintbrush using cream and just kind of dusting it more towards the parts that touch the face, and a little bit of the highlights of all of the pointed corner parts, I guess you can call them. And this kind of gave it a more organic look. Now to get a little spicy, and we're gonna be adding some more details to kind of make this, in my opinion, look more rusty and like she's been down in hell and like walking around in dirt and stuff, and all of this has gotten really aged with the soot and things. And for this, I used a paintbrush and a mixture of red and brown Wicked paint, as well as Beast Spice Paprika. And again, you want this kind of mixture to be a little bit more thick. The paprika is going to dry on the surface and give it a texture, and this is what it's going to kind of feel, that like rusty kind of look. You can also use cinnamon as a replacement for this, or you can just use sand. I like to use paprika though, just because it has a more natural red color, and I don't like the smell of cinnamon, so yeah. And I applied this into all of the crevices, having it more heavy towards the creases, and then just wait for it to dry, and that'll be it for making your cosplay spicy. Now I haven't forgotten about the gemstone, and for this one, I wanted the gemstone to look like it was kind of naturally growing out of these horns, kind of. I ended up painting it by hand with gold chrome around the edge to kind of be like a bezel, and I kind of bleeded the paint down into the horn-like structure, so it kind of looked like it was gold growing out of the bone. Yeah. Then I sealed everything with UVLS matte. And the last parts for painting is the actual gem, and for this I did a mixture of brown, crimson, and candy blood red onto just the gemstone, and then waited for it to dry, and then hand sealed it with UVLS satin onto just the gemstone and a tiny bit of the gold bezel around it to complete the horns. And if you've gotten this far, thank you so much. I appreciate your support on here and watching the video. Hope you are finding this helpful, but now we must finish these bad boys. So let us add the fabric parts. And here's the list of all of the tools and materials I used for all of the fabric parts. And to start off, we're going to be using some black elastic. I cut it into a strip about 4 inches, but you may need this shorter or larger depending on your head size. And for this, I used Surebonder hot glue, gluing it to the inside of our headpiece at the very bottom, as well as to the other side. And this is gonna make it so you can still open the headpiece piece back and forth, but it will also go smaller so that way when it sits on your neck, it doesn't feel super loose. And for the fabric sections, I use the same 3 fabrics that I used for the skirt of my Lilith cosplay, and I kind of just had a bunch of leftover scraps, so I was just using what I had, kind of cutting them into rectangle pieces first, and then randomly just trimming the bottom using scissors. And I put the helm on one of my head forms, and then I kind of just pinned the fabric onto the head through the foam, so that way I can kind of see how I wanted it to sit, so I could kind of trim it to the lengths that I want and see how many layers that I wanted for the piece. And I think I ended up having 5 different sets of layers with the 3 different types of fabric, but you can do it however you want and however you feel it will look the best. I wanted this to cover my hair as well as to look kind of like hair, and that was kind of the style I was going for. And this is what it looked like when I was done. But you don't want it to just look like it was freshly cut fabric. You want to make it look aged, and for this you can use a file cleaner, and this is basically a wooden block with a bunch of spikes that's supposed to clean your files for filing wood and metals and things. And I just use this and kind of scrape the bottom of each of these. This is naturally going to fray all of the fabric and make it look a lot more aged. Do be careful because it will actually rip the fabric as well. Now it's time to weather all of the fabrics, and for this I wanted it to look like everything's been dragged through the mud. It's been through a lot. And for this we're going to be using the Candyline paint from Createx Colors, specifically their Dirt Track Brown and Black. And I kind of went back and forth between these, doing mixtures of both of these. You don't need a lot of paint, you just need to put some of it into a cup as well as water. The more water you add, the more diluted the pigment is going to be, and it will be lighter, so you can do natural different dips to the ends of your fabric with this to kind of look like it's gone through a couple of different dragging through the mud. Then just dip it back and forth and wring out all of the extra water. I will remind you, you do want to wear gloves for this, as the candy line of paint will stain your skin, so you are warned. Then you can just use skirt hangers or hangers that have clips on either side to hang up your fabric. I wait for this to dry, and then I come back and I dip it again, and then I'll use a dry paintbrush that I dip directly into the paint and kind of spritz it on top of the fabric. This is going to leave heavy pigment spots and splashes on the fabric. Then you can come back with a spray bottle with water and kind of spritz it, and this is going to naturally have where those heavy pigmented paint parts are. It's going to naturally just kind of drip down the fabric, and this is going to look the most weathered, in my opinion, that you can get. Then you can just repeat this as many times as you want. Again, I started with the brown and then went towards the black at the end. This will take a little bit to dry, so I recommend waiting at least a full day, if not 2 days, and then you can bring it back to your studio to finish out the horns. And I started by kind of pinning my parts in place a little bit, starting with the bottom piece of fabric, and then we're going to grab Surebonder hot glue and hot glue gun and start attaching it. For each of these pieces, I highly recommend starting in the center and then gluing it going out towards the horns. Also, I would highly recommend using Surebonder's black glue, as this way when the glue dries, you don't really notice it. Then just attach. And for the very top ones, I ended up gluing it to the underside of the 4mm foam where the middle forehead spike is. This will kind of help it to look like it's coming naturally from the cave-like part that we made. And that will complete our horns for Lilith. And I'll note that for these horns, when I originally wore this many months ago, when I first made it, I had a different piece here with latex, and I did actually foam clay horns. Now, I didn't like how it looked, so I scrapped all that, removed all of it, and I added a new piece, which is still latex. It sculpts my face a little bit better in my opinion, as well as I 3D modeled and printed these small little spikes, so that way it would look a little bit more three-dimensional and less gummy bear squishy little foam clay pieces. It looks kind of bad, but in my opinion this looks a lot better now, and I'm happy with the final result. And another thing, for when I put this on, I actually put my hair in a bun on the inside, so it sits right here, and I have an elastic band that sits underneath the bun. So this kind of helps hold it in place, and I can use some bobby pins as well as I can kind of stretch this open and close. And then for the latex part right here, I end up gluing that down to my face, this cowl, and I just use eyelash glue because that's what I have. So it works, but it does get caught in my hair just a bit. So do be warned, but that is the best way I found to support and have this stay on my head for a full day. And I hope that helps. And that, guys, is how I made the horns for my Lilith cosplay from Diablo. I hope you found this video helpful for making your very own set, and if so, let me know in the comments, as well as don't forget to subscribe and like this video. A big thank you to all of my company sponsors here on YouTube, as well as all of my members, specifically those legendary members who financially help to support me so I can continue doing this as my full-time job, as well as bringing you more cosplay tutorials. And I'll see you for our next one. Much love, guys.